Okay, I'd like to do a little bit deeper dive in terms of the settings that you may encounter when attempting to create and deploy a Blackboard test. So just backing up, the way to create a test is just hit that plus, go to create, and then under assessment click test. But we've already done that. We have our test here. It's currently hidden from students. We could make that visible at any point, or we could assign some release conditions to that, either based on prior completion of a unit or a particular score on another assessment, or group membership. But I'm not going to cover that right now. I'm just going to make it visible to students. And then I'm going to click this gear, which is going to open up the test settings menu. And it's a very long menu. Let me first say that each of these settings takes you to the settings menu that you can get to by this gear. So don't be confused. For example, if I click the gear, it's going to bring up details and information here first, and the due date settings are the first set of settings. If I click the due date here, it does the exact same thing, except it just puts the cursor inside of the due date field. So don't get confused too much. Clicking this gear gets you almost the same place as clicking these particular options. Just think of these as bookmarks to the various options from within this very long menu. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to just briefly describe what each of these settings do. To the best of my knowledge, this is a moving target, given that Ultra is in a perpetual state of change. So we're going to start from top to bottom. First is due date. Typically you want to assign a due date for your test, and you would set a time as well. A lot of faculty like to do 11:59. I think that's problematic, because if the clock strikes midnight, sometimes you can have some issues. So I just make them 11 p.m. on the due date. Usually my due date's Sunday for everything, because I go Monday to Sunday in my module weeks. Do you prohibit late submissions? In progress attempts will get submitted automatically at that due date and time. And remember, scrolling all the way to the bottom, do you want to have a time limit? I'm not sure why they have this option at the bottom. I think it should be more toward the top of the menu. But don't let this feature go unchecked if time limit is important to you. Will you prohibit new attempts after the due date? Typically, if you're going to prohibit late submissions, you're probably going to prohibit new attempts after the due date. In fact, it's locked so that you can't make that change. But you could prohibit new attempts after the due date. This would mean that late attempts would not be allowed, but an in-progress attempt would. Class Conversations is another communications channel. It's like a discussion board, but it's tied to various content items and especially assessments in the course. Presentation options. Would you like to present questions one at a time for the students? The default setting is that all your test questions are displayed on the screen at the same time, and students can move up and down the course canvas and answer the questions that they would like. If you decide to display one question at a time, then the prohibit backtracking feature is available to you. Would you like to randomize the questions? So whether or not you display them one at a time or whether or not they're randomized are two discrete choices. Do you want to randomize the answers in the case of multiple choice and matching questions? So those are two other options available to you. Test category or grade category test refers to what kind of category would you like this particular test to reside under. For example, you could have a quiz category and test, and you could, in the grade center, weight quizzes more likely than an actual test, and you could weigh a test more likely than an exam. So you have three different categories for what Blackboard calls tests. You can use this category in a substantive way or not. It's up to you. Attempts allowed, you have the option to allow between 1 and 10 attempts or an unlimited number of attempts. That's usually faculty preference based on whether or not this is a high stakes test or not. You can grade using points, a letter grade, or a percentage. Points are already determined by the value of each question that you select when you are creating that question. Options regarding anonymity and evaluation don't usually apply for an assessment such as a test where there are actually questions. And I mentioned in the first video that The base functionality for tests and assignments is the same. So if you create an assignment and you have questions embedded in that assignment, which you can do now, you will have these options unavailable to you. Assessment grade, post assessment grades automatically. If this box is checked, then you do not need to click the post button after tests have been graded, whether you manually grade them or whether you have them graded automatically because they are automated questions. If this box is not checked, you must hit the post next to each submitted test in the appropriate location in Blackboard. And I'll show that in a video further in this course. Assessment results, this is what happens to the automated feedback and score that students receive after having taken a test. And clicking any of these options will send us to a secondary submenu that allows us to select the item. So in much the same way that we clicked due date and it took us to the due date section of this menu, when we click any of these three links, it will take us to another submenu that we can get out of by clicking this white X. So do we allow students to view their submission? After the submission, after individual grade is posted, after due date, after all grades are posted, or on a specific date. So you have quite a bit of flexibility and choice in terms of how students can view their submission. Do we show automated feedback after the submission, after the due date, after all grades are posted, or on a specific date? Do we show question scores after individual grade is posted, after due date, after all grades are posted, or on a specific date? And we're just going to get out of this menu by clicking this X, or you could hit cancel. Notice that there's kind of an interface flaw that it sends us all the way back to the beginning of the menu when we back out of that particular sub menu. Assessment security, so you can create an access code. Original mode had a password feature. This has replaced the password feature. So we click access code, turn that on, and then it gives us a unique access code. We can copy that or we can refresh it to get a different access code. And when I cancel, notice it takes us all the way back. There's Respondus Lockdown Browser functionality. I'm not sure if we have that enabled as an institution, but this is an option that may be available to us in the future. Remember, we have time limit. Time limit, I think, should be much higher in this submenu. We don't use grading rubrics for assessments with questions such as a test. Goals and standards, I'll skip that because it's a fairly involved set of features and functions. We can assign a particular assessment, including a test, to groups. So we could make it so that one group took one test, one group took another test. Perhaps you have a combo class like a upper division and graduate course in one section, and the graduate students don't need to take this test while the undergraduates do. The originality report is available, I believe, for some essay questions. Be careful with this because I've read some notes about how it will not work with embedded files within an essay question. So if the nature of your assessment is going to be longer form, you may consider just having it deployed as an assignment where students submit a paper. And then you can add a short 750 character description of the test, and that appears back in the content area underneath the test title. So this is a little bit longer video, and I hope it at least partially explains the various functionalities available as part of the test settings menu and submenus.